You know, there are a lot of parenting programs and parenting videos out there, and no program or video can guarantee to make you a better parent. And my series is no exception to that rule. See, each program or video is more like a tool in your toolbox. If the tool is working, well, stick with it. But if it's not, it's time to retool and try something different. Whatever program you subscribe to, look at each technique as an experiment. Try it out, change it up, and try it again. You don't always need to throw away the baby with the bathwater. There's probably something in each program that's worth keeping. See, there really is no such thing as a parenting expert. Just people who look for patterns in the adult-child interaction. They make observations and then generalizations, and then they evaluate what's effective and what's ineffective, and then they try to pass that information on. What we do know is who we are and how we interact with the world and with other people is a greater predictor of how our children are going to turn out, more so than any judicious application of a parenting program or wisdom gleaned from a parenting video. See, there's no guarantee on how your kids will turn out. But the good news is, there are ways to increase the odds of raising happy, resilient, and productive adults. One of the ways to do it is to look in a mirror and ask yourself, are you the type of adult that you want your child to grow up to be? See, kids work really hard to try and understand their parents and how their environment works. Kids are really good observers, but they're not really good at making interpretations. And this makes sense because the child's brain is developing, and each experience wires a new neural pathway in their brains. And how a child experiences shape their pathways influences how a child views their world and views other people when they grow up to become adults. There are no perfect parents, and this is good because we can model for our children how to make mistakes, be okay with them, learn from them, and move on. Especially if we want compassionate, resilient kids who happily make contributions in their world when they become adults, regardless of what those contributions look like. See, kids need to, and they do well, if they feel loved, connected, validated, and affirmed. When a kid feels love, connection, validation, and affirmation, they feel safe learning from the consequences of their mistakes. And we feel better as parents as well. See, we want our kids to make lots of mistakes when they're young and the price tag is cheap, so that they make fewer mistakes and wiser decisions when they grow up to be teenagers. When a parent looks at their child's mistakes as one more step on the road to wisdom, we parents feel better about our kids, and we actually feel a little bit better about our parenting as well. See, kids look to our reactions to figure out who they are. It might be a good time to ask yourself, what are my kids learning about themselves from my reactions? So, the way we parents talk to our kids really does influence what a child thinks of themselves. And I like to think that there are 3 different types of parents. The first type of parent is that parent who hovers over their children. They rescue them. They overprotect them. These are your helicopter parents, and we've heard this term coined many, many times. And the message that the helicopter parent is sending their child is, you're too fragile. You can't make it in life without me. You're going to need me to run interference. You need me to protect you, and I really don't think that you can make it in life without me. Then the other type of parent is more authoritarian. This is the parent that is rigid, inflexible. These are the drill sergeant parents. The drill sergeant parent is the parent that says, do it now or else. And the message that the drill sergeant parent is sending to their kid is, you can't think. I have to do all the thinking for you. I need to boss you around and I need to tell you what to do. And without me, I don't think you're capable of making a life without me. The message that these type of parents send their children is, well, children of these type of parents tend to be rigid and controlled. They're self-doubting and they're afraid to take risk. They're driven to perfection and they're never satisfied. They believe that everybody's criticizing them and finding fault in them. They expect others to take advantage of them because they've learned that nobody is to be trusted. They become passive aggressive. They're subject to procrastination and resistance. They're unable to attend to their own needs. Instead, they focus on the needs of others to their own derailment. They seek significant others who are controlling and possessive. They're often prone to eating disorders and addictions. They can be plagued by psychosomatic illnesses such as stomach aches and headaches. And sadly, deep down, they resent their parents. But strangely enough, they can't individuate themselves from their parents later on in adulthood. Then you have the type of parent that is, well, they're a little bit more democratic. They sit down with their kids and they're present with them and they listen to them and they let their children express themselves, and these parents won't pass judgment. These type of parents we'll call the consultant parents, and these are the parents that are there to give their children advice, and yet they let their kids make lots of little decisions with the idea that if they let their kid make decisions and let their kid make mistakes when the price tag is affordable, those kids will make fewer mistakes when they become adults. The message that these parents send their kids is, it's best that you do your own thinking because the quality of your life has a lot to do with the decisions that you make. See, there's something called the Pygmalion effect, and it kind of goes like this. As a teacher believes the student to be, so the student becomes. Well, we can project that out into parenthood, and we can say, as the parent believes their child to be, so the child becomes. We kind of consultant parents understand that adversity is important to a child, and we know that without adversity, a person hardly knows whether or not they're honest and capable or not. So what does a consultant type parent look like? Well, these are the parents that take really good care of themselves in front of the children. We know in the world of first responders that if the first responder doesn't take care of themselves, well, they're not capable or they're not available to take care of their patient and those that are in need. And the same can be said for parents. If a parent doesn't take care of themselves, well, they're not available to take care of the kid. And when a parent takes care of themselves in front of the child, well, they're sending a powerful message and they're modeling some great behaviors that a parent or that a child can use later on to become more assertive and able to stand up for themselves. So what does that look like? Well, these type of parents never tell a child what to do. They get better results by telling the child what they, the parent, is going to do instead. They'll offer their child lots of choices and alternatives instead of orders. And the choices that they offer the kid are binary choices, and they're choices that are created by the parent, and either choice, whatever the child should answer, it will make that parent deliriously happy. But it does give that kid a sense of control and a sense of ownership, and that kid is less likely to be resistant. And when a kid makes a choice and they make a bad choice, they can learn the consequences of their bad choice in a safe, loving environment. These type of parents, when they are confronted with the problem, they will use meaningful actions in a loving way and very few words. Because the more words we use, the less kids will hear us. And whenever they have to deliver a consequence to their kid, it's not a punishment, it's a consequence. Consequence is something that would happen in the natural world if something happened. A punishment is something you derive to get even with the child. So when a child needs to feel a consequence, that parent will wrap that consequence up in a loving blanket of empathy. Here's some thoughts to consider about different parenting styles. If you have a permissive method of parenting, well, you give the child the impression that they have no social responsibility for their behavior. If you have a more authoritarian method of parenting, well, you teach your child to fear authority and ultimately to rebel against it. But if you have a more democratic or consulting style of parenting, well, you enable the child to establish effective limits and participate effectively in the decisions that affect him or her and the whole family. Consultant parents are the type of parents that when a child creates a problem, that parent hands the problem back to the child in a loving and supportive way. When a parent hands a child back the problem, that child learns how to handle their own problems, and they learn how to solve their own problems. And what happens when a parent doesn't let go of the problem that belongs to the child? Well, that child gets no experience solving their own problems. So, how do you know when to hand a problem back to a kid? How do you know who owns the problem? Because sometimes the children's behavior are our problems, and we know that when the behavior affects us. For example, if a child's slowness in getting ready for school makes him or her late, well, we stay clear of the problem. We let the kid go up to the front desk and tell the secretary that they're late, and that the only excuse they have is that the child was creating their own problems getting ready for school. If the child's slowness in getting ready to leave the house makes us late, well, we deal with it. There's this rule that it's important to remember, that if it's a problem for us parents, well, then it soon should be a problem for the kid. So how do we know when it isn't our problem? Well, when we're upset because the child is upset, then it's probably the child's problem. The good thing to ask yourself is, what's going to happen to me, the parent, if that problem doesn't get solved? If the answer is nothing, well, then it's the child's problem. You know, it's interesting how we sometimes as parents go to this whole shame thing, and we start feeling like if we're not perfect parents and if our kids have lots of problems, then it makes us look bad as a parent. And we got to be careful how we as parents twist the problem around so that we think it's our problem. For instance, whether or not to wear a coat outside, let the kid decide that. The kid is capable of figuring out whether the kid is cold or not, and quite honestly, the kid is probably not cold, even though we are. These little guys are burning so many calories in the process of growing up that they generate a lot of heat. So where we might feel cold, the kid may not be. So why don't we parents stay clear of that? Grades. We can't make a child learn. We can give them opportunities to learn. We can create a good learning environment, but the bottom line is we're not going to be able to make a kid learn. And the more we force a child to perform well in school, I wonder if we're going to create some resentment that keeps that child from being the best student that they can be, because instead of going to school for their own personal growth, development, and education, they feel like they have to go to school just to please their parents. And wouldn't it be sad that a child should decide to get back at we parents by doing poorly in school, which effectively affects them? Sometimes it almost seems as if sometimes we need a kid's problem to be our problem, and I wonder why that is. Here's some thoughts to consider. Sometimes couples enter into a relationship with some unresolved needs. They have this need to be needed. And if the needs aren't met, well, the couple may have children in hopes that that child will meet those needs. Then the child becomes the object to fulfill the unmet needs of the parents in the relationship. If the child can't meet those needs, or his or own needs, that child then fails to develop a separate self. They become overly enmeshed with the parents. And sadly, this cycle is repeated into the next generation. So allowing our kids to solve their own problems presumes an implicit, basic trust that their behavior will change as they learn from their own experiences. We want our kids to grow up and say, I can find solutions to my own problems. Then they become less dependent on us. They become less dependent on anybody else. See, 9 times out of 10, the best thing that can happen to a kid is to be tossed overboard and compelled to sink or swim. Now, of course, that's a metaphor, but you see the point. I mean, sometimes kids just have to be put into a stressful situation to realize that they actually have what it takes to make it. So when we sit down and we interact with our kids, reflect on the type of message that you want to send your kid. Do you want your kid to grow up becoming overly dependent on you, thus overly dependent on somebody else, and maybe getting into unhealthy relationships, unable to be creative, which might impede their ability to be successful in the work environment? Or do you want your kid to learn how to take healthy risk, challenge themselves so that they can grow and develop, so that they become assertive enough, so that they can have healthy relationships, and so that they can develop some confidence so that they can move up in the work world? It's really important to understand how we talk to our kids.
How a parent interacts with their kid really does send a powerful message to the child. When parents show a child love by overprotecting them and rescuing them from life's challenges, discomfort, frustration, generally unpleasant situations, that parent is sending a pretty powerful message to the child that the child might interpret as, I may not have the strength or the character to handle hardships and carry on. I'm obviously not capable. I need to expect my parents to rescue me whenever the going gets tough. And yet, when parents are aggressively controlling and are very hands-on, telling a child how to live their life and leave a child with little control over their own life, the child might interpret that as Well, clearly I'm not capable of thinking for myself, and I need to be directed on how to have a good life. I'm neither responsible nor am I capable. And yet, when a parent sees life as a learning adventure, that's best when a child is allowed as much autonomy as is reasonably safe, and lets kids make as many decisions about things that affect the kid's comfort, and only provide as much help and advice as necessary, but as little as possible, thus handing back to the child as much control as is reasonable, and allowing for some benignly unfortunate and mildly uncomfortable consequences to occur. That parent is sending a message to the kid that the kid will probably interpret as, my parents believe that I can think for myself. They believe that I can overcome adversity and that I am capable. And I believe that about myself as well, which is a pretty necessary skill set in my life ahead. But I know that I'm capable. Yeah, kids do learn a lot about themselves by the way parents interact with them. And a wise parent might sit back and consider just how their interactions are affecting the message that the kid is receiving about themselves. If you like this stuff, and even if you don't, go ahead and hit like, share it, and subscribe to my channel, and I'll make some more of it.